Hello and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly, Director of Advanced Media Production at Cal State Long Beach. Today we're going to talk about America's passion for sports and how that passion affects our culture. My guest today is Dr. Kevin Sverduk. Dr. Sverduk is a lecturer in the Department of Kinesiology. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you for joining us on Talking Points.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
I just mentioned the term kinesiology. There are some of our viewers that may not be familiar with that term, and for that reason, could you give us a brief explanation of what that term means?
Sure. Kinesiology might be best described as the science of movement and sport. It accompanies exercise physiology, motor learning, coaching, athletic training, and then my specialties, which are sports psychology and sociology of sport.
Very good. Well, let's go ahead and get started on our main topic, and that is America's passion with sports.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with professional sports because people seem to be very passionate about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that over the years, the purpose of being a fan seems to be to develop an affinity to a particular team. Usually it's in the location where you live. And fans like to, and fan is short for fanatic, of course, they want to feel strongly about the team that they're following, and it's usually because they get to know the players, or at least they feel they know the players because of the daily reports and the sports pages and interviews on television, and they're part of the home team. However, because of free agency, that affinity with players has been interrupted somewhat, because now players don't stay with the same professional team for their entire careers like they used to. Because of contracts and the availability to get a higher paying contract, players move on a lot. What about that? Has the advent of free agency in sport been a good thing overall, or has it turned it into more of what some people would refer to as kind of a mercenary endeavor?
Well, it probably depends on who you ask. But I think that what we see in sport and the evolving of sport is free agency had to come about just for the welfare of the players. I mean, just to give them some basic rights of freedom. And I think, but with media too, it's become more global. And so it's almost as if the athletes now are playing for a league rather than for a team. And some fans don't like it, but other fans like it because they may have a team that hasn't won for a while. And the free agency allows the teams to maybe reload and restructure their organization and have a chance to have a winning team. So fans, I think, for the most part, would rather have a team that wins than a team that loses with some favorite players on it.
Okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit, because you started to talk about the league wanting a level playing field, and we can say that sort of literally and figuratively in this case. They want a level playing field and a certain amount of parity across the league so that fans stay loyal because of the winning tradition as opposed to, again, loyalty to specific players. And in order to ensure that, or at least to try to encourage that parity, leagues have set up salary caps. So every team is limited by a salary cap. And so once you get close to the salary cap, it's no longer possible to hold on to all of the top paid players. And free agency allows them to move out and go to other places where they can get more. So if we put those two together, the free agency and the salary caps, we've pretty much guaranteed that players are going to be moving pretty frequently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so it's become a game within the game. Now general managers now have a huge role in trying to identify, okay, what players do they need, how much do they have to spend, how much can they spend on the quarterback versus, say, a wide receiver. And in a sense, it's made it fun, for we think about fantasy football, which is huge. Is the fantasy football, I mean, that we have all these budding general managers. It becomes a whole nother sport within a sport of trying to identify players who would do well. And you have to understand also that it increases the entertainment value, and ultimately professional sports are an entertainment business. And the more drama through close contests that they can have, the greater the entertainment.
Well, it's interesting you do mention entertainment because television seems to dominate in all of the major sports leagues today. It's the television contracts and the lure of those large television contracts for the leagues. And the advertisers, of course, are really what is behind those big contractors and the contracts and the ability to attract big advertising dollars. But a lot of fans have become very annoyed with the fact that it seems like the advertisers break in every 5 minutes with another spot. And so are fans going to have to accept that this is a big business and it takes a lot of money to run these sports and that's just part of the game?
They're going to have to, yes, absolutely. But I think also you have to understand when you look at the broadcast, we've got to look at the whole thing. The ads themselves have become part of the entertainment. I mean, now many people have told me they look forward to the Super Bowl for the ads, not necessarily for the game. So it's been part of the necessary evil of television, but they've also added that to the entertainment value. You see in many of these ads, you see the players themselves as actors in those. So you become even more closely drawn into the sport through the ads.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about loyalty of owners to their locations, their cities where they reside. We've seen that teams move around too. It's not just players that move around. Owners move entire teams from city to city. And we just recently saw here in Southern California the San Diego Chargers moving from San Diego up to Los Angeles. And so usually with that movement comes the promise of a brand new stadium. And then it's a question of, well, who's going to pay for the stadium? Oftentimes the owners want the local communities to pay for it through some kind of tax or tax subsidy. What about that? Do large tax subsidies to help professional owners build new stadiums, does that money ever really come back to the community, the tax dollars, or is it more just a matter of bragging rights and local pride?
That's a good question. And most of the research, and because this has been done enough times where people have been able to look at it, and most of the research has shown that the money invested by the taxpayers does not come back. It does not tend to benefit the communities, the schools. It tends to mostly benefit, obviously, the team and those few individuals who might have vested ties to the team, being their restaurant, hotel owners, construction companies, and so on. So mostly it doesn't benefit them.
Mm-hmm. And when you see those kinds of movements of teams, again, that has an impact on the fan loyalty. You have to, in many cases, try to develop a new following in a different city.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, because they're abandoning their local base. But I think what we've seen now is they get less money from the local base. Most of the money is going to come from the television contract. They're looking for the new stadiums that have the luxury boxes. They make a lot of revenue from the luxury boxes. And again, with the internet and television, you can still follow your team. And the Oakland Raiders are a good example. They were in Oakland for many, many years, a very, very loyal fan base. They moved down to LA. Many of the fans would come from from Oakland down to LA to watch games continue. They picked up some loyal fans in Los Angeles. Now they went back to Oakland. Now they're talking about moving to Las Vegas. So it's almost like they've become a more of a global enterprise rather than a local enterprise. And maybe many of the teams I think that's part of what's happened.
Okay, well, let's transition now to talking about the impact of drug use in sports, and particularly performance-enhancing drugs such as steroids. I know that that's been a big controversy. It's been a big concern of all sports leagues. It seems to have pervaded the sports world. And I know that baseball, professional baseball, had a real problem with this back in the, I believe it was in the late 1990s when we had that big home run derby. And virtually all of the players that were hitting those home runs were taking performance-enhancing drugs. What do we do with all those records now?
And what's interesting is in most other sports, if we look at, say, the Olympics, cycling, athletes who've been tested positive for drugs, those records that they established have all been removed. Lance Armstrong's name doesn't appear on any of the Tour de France victories. Baseball has not done that. They've chosen not to do that, and I'm not sure why. It's a very interesting dilemma. Some people argue that it was a fair playing field because everybody was using it. Therefore, we should keep them. And others will argue that hitting a baseball is still, it doesn't matter how much muscle you have, that it's, you still have to respect the skill that they had. But they've chosen not to. And remains to be seen what they decide to do in the future.
Let's talk about track and field. That's an area where they clearly have cracked down on performance-enhancing drugs, taking away gold medals, taking away records, all of those things. You mentioned that in cycling with Lance Armstrong and others. So track and field takes this very seriously. What about horse racing, where horses are being doped, and obviously the horses have no say in the matter? What are some of the ethical issues involved with that?
Well, I mean, a ton. I mean, especially when you look at the long-term or even short-term health problems associated with it. But I think what we have to look at with the drug problem here gets back to the entertainment value. These are entertainment industries. They make their revenue off of people being entertained by their product. Not at all different from the movies or television. And in those fields, we see actors and actresses having cosmetic surgery done and so on to affect their appearance in ways that make them more entertaining. So a lot of this comes back to the entertainment value. We want to see horses run faster. We want to see athletes run faster and jump higher and hit harder and throw harder. We want to see that, hit more home runs. And so that's been the whole kind of impetus behind the explosion of the drug use.
Well, what about, we only have a minute left before we go to the break. What about the enormous pressure that athletes are under when they know that their competitor, let's say track and field, you know that the two guys that are in the two lanes next to you are using drugs. What are the dilemmas that you have to face as an athlete in that case?
It's huge. I mean, I've worked with many track and field athletes who are just frustrated. They want to play cleanly. Their values in life and their moral compass tells them to play cleanly, yet they are clearly losing races to athletes that are using and not getting caught. And it puts the athlete in a very difficult position. And unfortunately, I think it forces many athletes to go against what they know is right, just in order to be able to do what they love to do.
On that note, we'll have to go to the break. And stay with us. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about how sports and the impact of big money sports have affected the college ranks. Stay tuned.
Get involved. Become a leader in the well-being of our nation, actively lending your voice and energy to promote wellness. Be the voice for public education and health education in schools, community organizations, hospitals, and clinics. You can become part of this exciting field with a degree from Cal State Long Beach.
Welcome back to Talking Points. I'm Dave Kelly. My guest today is Dr. Kevin Sverduk. Now, Kevin, before we went to the break, we were talking about the abuse of drugs, particularly performance-enhancing drugs. There's another example I can think of, and that was with human growth hormones. I know that there was a defensive tackle by the name of Lyle Alzado. I'm sure you remember the name.
Yeah.
He played for the Denver Broncos and also the Oakland Raiders. And unfortunately, he passed away not too long after his playing days ended with a brain tumor. And he, I know, announced to the media that he believed that his brain tumor was somehow related to human growth hormones that he had taken earlier in his career. And so there are real consequences to taking drugs that go beyond just losing the gold medal or losing some title that you've won. So when we talk about drug abuse and the use of drugs in sports, do we have the right protocols in place to catch the offenders and to hold people accountable, or is there corruption in that aspect of it as well?
Yes, potentially we have the science of detection has never been stronger, and we're able to detect drugs in the system to a higher extent than we've ever had. Part of the problem, again, comes back to the motivation behind doing the testing. What's in the best interest of the sport? Now, what we unfortunately typically see is many of the agencies that are being hired to test are being hired by the very league that they're testing. So you right away have a conflict of interest. So you have we have cases of where organizations are coming in to do testing. Their paycheck, whether or not they get rehired to do that services, depends on what they find. Now, if they find too much, that might not be in the best interest of the league. If they find just enough to maybe give the impression that the league is cracking down on drug use, then that's what the league would like to have. So there is a problem with that. We haven't been able to detach the detection agencies from the actual leagues.
And as you said, this is about entertainment, and none of us want to have to go back and say, well, the guy that I followed and the guy I bought the baseball card, or I bought the football card and I bought the jersey and all of that, well, now that's all tainted. So nobody wants to admit that there has been tainting of the sport, and so that does create a real dilemma. Well, let's talk about another issue that's come up a lot in recent years, and that is the issue of concussions in sport and head injuries. Now, this is obviously a problem in football. It's a contact sport. We also see it in soccer quite a bit, and also obviously in boxing. And there are some other sports where this comes up, maybe hockey, for example. So what about the concussion protocols? Are they getting better? Are we becoming more proactive in terms of trying to prevent concussive injuries, and will it get better in the future?
It's gotten a lot better, and the tide of public opinion has shifted now to looking at the long-term health benefits of the athletes, and not just accepting that you play football and you're going to get hurt. So in standard high school, college, professional games now, they have standard concussion protocols that they use right on the sidelines, and they can detect, and in many cases, many of the leagues have implemented certain guidelines for if they find certain levels of concussion that they're going to be removed from the game until they pass certain standards. In terms of the preventative portion, the NFL has made great strides in recent years in trying to change the way people are playing the sport, not leading with your head, doing grassroots campaigns to teach kids how to tackle properly. So we're moving in I think, in a much healthier direction with concussions.
Well, that's good news, and certainly it has made big news over the past few years. A lot of lawsuits and accusations, and I think leagues have had to take a closer look at this. Well, let's talk about youth sports.
Okay.
And when we discover young athletes, sometimes at a very early age, and I'm thinking of basketball in particular, because a lot of basketball players are discovered as early as 7th grade or 8th grade, on the playgrounds even in some cases. And there are a number of people that are involved in scouting and identifying these young players, and some of these scouts are not necessarily looking out for the best interests of the players. They're looking for something in it for themselves. And then the idea is to connect these young players with colleges as early as possible. Talk about that phenomenon and why it is potentially hazardous or dangerous, especially to the young athlete, if they're identified too early and promoted as the next coming of Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing what happens is these kids at a very young age are offered these great deals. If they're in 7th grade, they're offered a tuition-free high school at a nice private school. They're offered college scholarships, all with the dream of playing in the NBA. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a professional athlete. Every child, I think, has that dream. It's what do you give up in exchange for that? You know, what is expected of you? Obviously, the scholarships, the expectation is that you're going to play at a high level and lead the school team to a championship. Less emphasis and less expectation is required in terms of other areas of their lives, like developing their academics, developing their social life. So there's a lot of on the table there for them, and what can be lost is the development of the whole person. And also, we see a lot of times where kids just burn out. They've gone down that road, and they get an injury, and they've just burnt out.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we see them go into the college ranks, and we're talking about basketball now, oftentimes they will just play 1 year, and if they do well, they'll leave immediately for the NBA afterwards. And I know that for a lot of the major colleges, that this requires the major colleges to have to reload every single year with a new crop of freshmen. And I've seen it a couple of times where teams will win a national championship with maybe 4 starters that are freshmen, and virtually all 4 of them are gone the next year.
Absolutely.
So that seems a bit challenging. And the other aspect of that, when I said hazardous or dangerous, people might think that I'm overemphasizing, you know, what happens here. But you know, these kids are, I call them kids because they're not 21 yet. A lot of them are 19, 20 years old, and they're going into the NBA and a lifestyle and fame and fortune that they haven't really been prepared for at such an early age. And it puts them in positions where they're easily compromised. What about that? If you were counseling a young athlete, a young basketball player who had the skills after their freshman year to go pro, what kinds of things would you tell them, and what would you advise them to do?
I would ask them, you know, what do you want your life to be like after your basketball career is over? Begin to think about what do you want it to be like when you're 40 and when you're 50? What kind of life do you want to lead? And are you doing things that are going to ensure that? I would say you can become a whole person. You don't have to choose to excel in only one thing, which unfortunately the message seems to be sent and received by many of these kids is that they have to put all of their eggs in one basket. And they're given these wonderful opportunities to develop as a whole person by attending these wonderful universities and having opportunities to broaden themselves. But they're not. And that's sad. That's the unfortunate part of this process.
And when they go into the NBA at such an early age and they have the fame and the money, they're vulnerable. And they're vulnerable to people taking advantage of them in ways that they're not expecting, especially the money aspect of it. But we hear about other things that they get involved in. And friends, lifelong friends, all of a sudden show up and want to participate in the wealth and the fame and all of that. And so you get these posses, as they call them, that fall around, the entourages, which get the players into a lot of trouble. So how do we, are the leagues attempting to educate the players before they enter this arena with the dangers?
Many of the teams now have in place some type of system. They might have a counselor or a sports psychologist that they use to work with the young players to help them make the adjustment. But you have to understand, Dave, I mean, these kids have had everything handed to them all the way through. They haven't had to make decisions on their own, and now they're in a situation where everything is their own personal decision. So they haven't had the practice of being able to do that. So teams are doing that to a certain extent. They're protecting their investment, if you will.
Let's talk about universities in general. And you know, we've certainly read plenty of news about scandals with sports programs and so-called student athletes. So are universities fulfilling their mission with student athletes? I know it varies, and it depends on what institution and which sport, and there are a lot of complicating factors that go into this. But are universities fulfilling their mission to educate students when they are essentially operating farm leagues for professional sports.
It's very difficult for them to do that in the current environment. To be competitive in the high levels of collegiate athletics, you essentially need student athletes that are training and putting everything into becoming the best they can be. And so their academics oftentimes suffer. And we have to begin to question, I think, yes, huge amounts of revenue are being provided to these universities, but what is the purpose of the student athlete? And when you schedule games, college games on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday night, that makes it next to impossible for them to really excel in the classroom. They're missing a lot of class, and we have to ask ourselves, is that really the mission that we want with college athletics?
And maybe another issue, we're just down to about a minute now in the program. When we talk about winning at all costs, that seems to be at the root of a lot of these things we're talking about, the abuse of the drugs and a number of other things, and the temptations. So winning at all costs obviously isn't the best way to go about it. It's much better to win from an ethical standpoint if you're following the rules and doing everything right. Is culture more interested in winning, or are we more interested in seeing things done the right way? That's a big question.
Well, that's a big question, and obviously it depends on who you ask. When you look at our social political system, it's win at all cost. I mean, the rewards are there. We not only financially, but also we tend to respect people who kind of gone beyond, and there is a cost to that. And instead of maybe winning at sport, we should be thinking about let's win at sport and let's win at life at the same time. But we don't tend to balance it out that way.
And so winning at all costs often has consequences, and you see sports being tainted by drugs and other things that we've been talking about. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds here. Tell us the most positive aspect of sports in society today. And in fact, we only have those 20 seconds, so go ahead.
For the athlete, the opportunity to be honest is when you're in the fishbowl of a competitive sport, it's just you, there's nowhere to run. There's nothing like it for personal growth, nothing like it.
On that note, we'll have to close out the program. I want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Talking Points. Join us again soon for the next episode. Until then, I'm Dave Kelly. Have a nice day.